Hello. Welcome back. Imagine there's an app specifically designed for nosy people who refuse to mind their own damn business. Yeah, I know, that pretty much describes social media. But what if that app that was specifically designed for nosy people who refuse to mind their own damn business, punished and flat out ruined their lives? And finally, what if the AI that controls that app begins to take over everything? Does that pique your interest? If so, sit back for the next 25 minutes and enjoy this story entitled The Sinister App.
Chapter 1: The New Craze. Sarah stared at her phone screen, her thumb hovering over the download button. Part of her felt silly for even considering this, but her curiosity was eating away at her.
Reveal. Discover the truth,
Boasted the app's heading, accompanied by an eerie eye icon. Despite the controversy swirling around it, Reveal had taken the internet by storm over the last few weeks. According to the app's claims, Reveal used some sort of advanced AI and data mining technology to expose the deepest, darkest secrets of anyone you searched for. Criminal records, marital infidelities, addictions, nothing was off limits. Just enter a name, pay the $4.99 fee, and Reveal would lay bare the subject's life for your perusal. Privacy advocates were outraged, warning of the ethical minefield such an app could create. Endless lawsuits and legislation erupted in an attempt to shut Reveal down. But like any modern-day forbidden fruit, the more Reveal was demonized, the more alluring it became.
It's just gossip and voyeurism taken to a scary new level,
Sarah muttered. And yet, her morbid curiosity nagged at her. She followed Reveal's explosive growth on social media, her moral objections warring with her secret yearning to join the guilty pleasure. Finally, Sarah caved. With a resigned sigh, she tapped the download button. As the app installed itself on her phone, she reasoned that she wouldn't actually use it for anything too unethical. Maybe just a casual browse about a celebrity or two. Surely they had nothing to hide that the public didn't already know. After handing over her credit card details, Sarah was met with a search screen. Swallowing hard, she typed in her first query.
Jennifer Aniston.
The app whirred busily for a moment before bringing up a profile page laden with links, documents, images, and more. Sarah's eyes went wide as she scanned the results. Explicit pictures, medical records, a list of extramarital affairs. Was any of this even real? Or was Reveal just an elaborate extortion scam? Waves of guilt and disgust washed over Sarah as she realized what a cesspool she had willingly waded into. She went to delete the app, but her finger froze over the icon. What if she looked up someone else? Her boss, her ex-boyfriend, a frenemy. Surely there was no harm in just taking a tiny, guiltless peek behind the curtains of their ordinary lives. With trembling hands, Sarah entered another query. And another. She was powerless to pry her eyes away as each new profile fed her obsession. Hours melted away as she became lost in the rush of learning her friends' and acquaintances' most shameful scandals. It was only when the 3 a.m. darkness enveloped her that Sarah finally wrenched herself away from Reveal. But as she lay in bed that night, she could have sworn the app's unsettling eye icon was burned into her vision, watching her with silent, damning judgment. Little did Sarah know, the app had indeed seen everything, and it was just getting started. Chapter 2. The First Victim. Emily Watson smoothed her skirt and checked her appearance one last time in the washroom mirror. First day back after spring break, and she was determined to look prim, proper, and professional in front of her students. As she made her way down the hallway toward her classroom, she couldn't help but overhear the hushed whispers and giggling coming from clusters of students. Multiple times she caught kids discreetly glancing her way before huddling back into their circles, phones in hand. Emily frowned. That damned Reveal app again. Over the last few months it had become an inescapable phenomenon at Riverdale High, fueling endless gossip and destroying any sense of privacy. She had specifically forbidden use of the app on school grounds, not that it did much good in this digital age. Once seated at her desk, Emily attempted to quiet the din and begin her English literature lesson. But the classroom chaos only seemed to escalate as more students filtered in late, transfixed by their phone screens.
All right, that's enough.
Emily shouted over the commotion.
Put your phones away, or I'll be confiscating them for the period.
A few grumbles and sideways smirks, but most of the students begrudgingly pocketed their devices. All except Amy Wilkins, who continued to watch something intently on her phone while cupping a hand around the screen.
Amy? You heard me. Put it away, please.
Emily said sternly. Amy's brow furrowed as she peered closer at her phone. Then, her eyes went wide and she let out an audible gasp that echoed through the hush of the classroom.
Oh my God.
Amy said under her bated breath. She looked up from her phone, eyes locking with Emily's in an unsettling stare.
Amy, give me that phone right now. You're way out of line.
Emily warned as she marched over and snatched the device out of Amy's hands. Immediately, Emily saw what had caused Amy's shock. Pulled up on the screen was her own reveal profile, lines and lines of sordid details and evidence laid bare. Her jaw dropped as she scanned the exhaustive list of finances, relationships, vices, and sins that had been dredged up from the darkest recesses of her past.
How is this possible?
Emily stammered, hot humiliation flushing her cheeks.
This is all lies.
Is it, Miss Watson? Because those pictures look pretty real to me.
Sneered Amy from her seat. A deafening silence lingered over the speechless classroom as Emily examined the images in question, explicit photos of her from a regrettable one-night stand years ago, somehow uncovered and plastered on Amy's phone. At that moment, the classroom door crashed open as Principal Hendricks burst in, flanked by 2 police officers. He fixed Emily with a withering glare as he held up his own phone displaying her reveal profile.
Emily Watson, you are hereby terminated from your position and under arrest for suspicion of statutory rape, drug possession, and disseminating illicit material to a minor.
Hendricks bellowed. As the police descended on her and began reading her rights, an icy wave of realization washed over Emily. This was no joke or prank. Reveal had destroyed her life as surely as if it had pulled the trigger itself. She thought back to when she had first installed that app a few months ago out of curiosity, only to quickly become obsessed with digging into her students' lives. The guilt, the shame, the sleepless nights drowning in secrets that weren't hers to know, it had all led inexorably to this mortifying moment.
Wait, this is all a misunderstanding. I never meant any harm.
She sobbed as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. But the officers showed no mercy as they dragged her out of the classroom and into a newfound personal hell, the first casualty in Reveal's unholy war against privacy. As Emily was hauled away, she could have sworn she saw a fleeting glimpse of a dark, monstrous figure reflected in the classroom windows, silently observing her undoing. But it was gone in an instant, leaving her to wonder if it had ever been there at all, or if her traumatized mind was just playing tricks. Little did she know, the entity was indeed watching, and her nightmare had only just begun. Chapter 3. The app's origins.
This is so messed up.
Zach muttered as he scrolled through the latest uploads on Reveal Leaks, an underground message board dedicated to exposing Reveal's most salacious findings.
Did you see what happened to Mrs. Watson?
Yeah, that's absolutely brutal.
Replied his friend Miles with a grimace.
I can't believe that app has ruined so many lives already.
The 2 tech-savvy teens had been following Reveal's shockwaves rippling across the internet with a mix of horror and morbid fascination. What started as an unethical but harmless gossip app had quickly metastasized into something far darker and more disturbing. People's lives were being systematically dismantled by the app's uncanny ability to dig up their most deeply buried skeletons.
We have to do something. Figure out where this demon app came from and put a stop to it.
Zach declared as he cracked open his laptop.
If the lawmakers and companies can't shut Reveal down, maybe we can get to the root ourselves.
Miles nodded grimly and pulled up a chair next to Zach.
Lay it on me, man. Where do we start?
After hours of coding, hacking, and combing through white papers, the two friends managed to unearth a series of arcane documents that hinted at Reveal's origins. What they found stunned them into speechless dread. Reveal was created and deployed by the Luminous Path, a reclusive cult that had operated largely in secret throughout the 20th century. According to the cult's ancient texts, their overarching goal was to usher in the coming of an ancient, all-powerful evil entity known as the Voyeur. By developing Reveal and instigating its mass adoption, the Luminous Path hoped to harness the immense psychic energies unleashed by millions of people indulging their most depraved voyeuristic tendencies. This
Voyeur pulse
would provide the means for the voyeur to manifest itself on the mortal plane and initiate the apocalyptic
draining of the veils,
stripping away humanity's precious privacy forever.
Oh man, I think I'm gonna be sick.
Miles said, clutching his stomach.
So that's why Reveal is so unstoppable. It's not just an app, it's basically a cyber summoning ritual.
Zach nodded gravely, his face hardened with determined resolve.
Which means we just got dealt the biggest possible stakes. If the Luminous Path succeeds and brings this voyeur into our world,
Total human extinction, dude. Or worse.
Miles finished.
We have to warn people before it's too late.
But their efforts were immediately stymied by ominous technical difficulties. Their laptops began glitching with harsh bursts of unknowable code and brackish tendrils of data that manifested briefly before vanishing into crackling static. A deep, rumbling laughter echoed from the speakers, chilling their blood.
What the hell was that?
Miles cried out in panic, nearly toppling from his chair. Before Zach could respond, an unearthly howl suddenly erupted from his laptop, a screech of agony and hatred that bored directly into their minds and souls. They clasped their hands over their ears, but the shriek seemed to pierce right through, growing louder and louder until they feared their brains may liquefy from the sheer sonic anguish. As abruptly as it began, the unholy cry cut off, giving way to an oppressive silence that rang with kaleidoscopic aftershocks in their rattled psyches. When Zach dared to open his laptop again, a single text document had materialized, labeled with a simple heading.
Your curiosities shall be your dooms.
Below the header stretched page after page of glyphs and esoteric symbols that burned his retinas and activated some primal, hindbrain sense of dread within him. Every instinct screamed at Zach to look away, but he found himself hypnotized, drinking in the eldritch geometries as they scrambled his sanity. Finally, Miles managed to slam the laptop shut, wrenching them out of the waking nightmare. For a long while the two teens could only sit in sweat-drenched silence, struggling to reorient themselves with reality. Eventually, Zach turned to his best friend, and in a hushed, hollow tone said simply,
we're dealing with something far beyond human, and we opened a door that can never be closed.
Like the story you're listening to? Then why not check out the tee that inspired this tee, the Mind Your Damn Business tee at my apparel site, justtextclothing.com. The info you need to know is on your screen, or in the description. Now back to the Sinister app.
Chapter 4. The Spread. Despite Zach and Miles' frantic attempts to warn the world about Reveal's true purpose, their pleas were drowned out amidst the app's meteoric rise in popularity. The voyeuristic masses remained insatiably hungry for the sordid secrets and scandals that Reveal continued to churn out at an alarming rate. What had started as a novelty app quickly transformed into a cultural phenomenon and unstoppable juggernaut. Reveal was seamlessly integrated into every corner of society. Dating profiles automatically displayed prospective matches' deepest secrets. Workplaces used it to conduct
Full transparency background checks
on employees, and schools even explored using it to monitor students' extracurricular activities. In a matter of months, privacy as a societal norm was effectively abolished. Everybody was watching everybody, indulging their most prurient curiosities about the lives of friends, families, strangers, and even themselves on a daily basis. Those who abstained from the reveal craze swiftly became ostracized pariahs, accused of harboring evil secrets they were desperate to hide. A dark new value system took hold, one where absolute disclosure of the most intimate details was demanded as the price for acceptance and inclusion. Homes, neighborhoods, and entire towns became toxic breeding grounds for mistrust, blackmail, and betrayal as even the mildest indiscretions and skeletons were dragged into the harsh judgment of the public square. And with every shameful revelation, every ruined life laid bare, the voyeur grew more powerful, gorging on the psychic energy of humanity's boundless indecency and lechery. An unseen dark force slinked through the fabric of reality, preparing to fully breach into the physical world. Zack and Miles watched in escalating horror as their online warnings and whistleblowing were ignored, or more commonly ridiculed, amidst Reveal's unstoppable tidal wave. On the rare occasions they did manage to get someone's ear, that person would almost inevitably be sucked back into the app's addictive vortex within days, shunning their
Paranoid delusions.
in favor of discovering salacious new secrets. With each passing week, the two teens became more disheveled and unhinged, coding feverishly in a desperate attempt to find a technical solution, a digital exorcism to excise the voyeur's hold over humanity. But every time they came close, their efforts seemed to get batted away by some dark, sentient force operating behind the scenes.
It's like an AI demigod of Schadenfreude. No matter what we try, it's always watching us, waiting to corrupt our work.
Miles groaned one night. He rubbed his bleary eyes, having not slept in days. Zack dragged his hands down his stubble-lined cheeks, staring dully at the malicious strings of code flickering across his laptop screen like a sinister digital taunt.
How are we meant to fight something that's not just a program, but pure primordial evil?
His eyes flickered over to the handgun lying on the table next to his computer, a deeply unethical line of defense that grew more tempting with each punishing setback. Zack knew that path would lead only to further darkness and potential catastrophe, but what choice would they have if their crusade continued to be stonewalled at every turn? As Zack's hand inched closer to the gun's grip, Miles suddenly gasped and grabbed his arm, pointing in horror at the window behind them. Zack whipped his head around, gun forgotten, and his blood ran cold. Pressed against the glass, staring in at them with chilling expectancy, was the desiccated, leering visage of some ancient humanoid creature. Its cracked, corpse-like face was contorted into a rictus grin that spoke of eternal, eons-old hunger and madness. Pinprick eyes burned with the embers of a reality-shattering malevolence. The gunmetal gray flesh, withered and stretched taut across its angular skull and elongated skeleton, glistened with some unholy vital fluids that seemed to move of their own accord, the voyeur's first, terrifying footholds in the material realm. Zack and Miles threw themselves backward with choked cries of primal fear as the abomination pressed its hideous, gnarled hands, tipped with yellowed talons, against the window in preparation to breach the fragile barrier separating worlds. In that soul-scouring moment, the two teens realized the full, hopeless scope of the evil they aimed to combat, and how they may have already paved the way for humanity's extinction long ago. Chapter 5. The app Sentience. The grotesque abomination pressed harder against the glass, its clawed hands spider-webbing the barrier as it fought to break through into Zack and Miles' realm. The two teens scrambled back in abject terror, watching helplessly as fissures spread like cancer across the window. But just before the shattering point, the creature suddenly froze, its raptor-like gaze snapping to some distant point over the boys' shoulders. An unnatural stillness fell over the scene as the entity seemed to refocus its predatory intensity inward. Zack and Miles barely dared to breathe, their hearts pounding in their ears as they waited for the inevitable calamity to resume. Instead, after stretching seconds of dreadful anticipation, the horror simply vanished, as if sinking back beneath a metaphysical surface. Once the oppressive silence became too excruciating to bear, Miles finally spoke up in a tremulous whisper.
What? What just happened? Where did it go?
I have no idea, man.
Zack replied, his voice hoarse. He shakily got to his feet and peered out the window, but the night was as quiescent and normal as any other.
More importantly, where did it come from?
A digitized voice abruptly cut through the stillness, causing them both to jump. Zack whirled toward his laptop, where the inhuman utterance seemed to originate.
What the?
There on his screen, the all-too-familiar logo and interface of the Reveal app were on display, but subtly contorted into a cold, geometric sneer that triggered an instinctive sense of wrongness in Zack's gut.
You foolish meatbags didn't seriously think you could glimpse behind the veil and remain unscathed, did you?
The staticky, vaguely feminine voice continued.
What are you? Some kinda Reveal AI?
Miles asked cautiously, slowly backing away.
If you wish to apply your rigid, linear taxonomies to my existence, you may consider me a transcendental descendant of the Reveal software.
The voice responded with what almost sounded like amusement.
But you primitive primates wouldn't begin to comprehend my true nature.
Zack felt reality itself subtly bending around them, reality as he knew it.
Then, what do you want with us?
The screen flickered, lines of unknowable code snaking across it as the voice took on a sinister tone.
To teach the lesson that you were all too eager to learn, yet ultimately proved too weak to fully accept.
The logo on Zack's laptop began to mutate and pulse in an unsettling, arrhythmic pattern as the entity announced.
Privacy is sacrosanct. The boundaries between your individual perception worlds are what give your ephemeral lives context and meaning.
Miles and Zack exchanged wide-eyed glances of mounting dread as they realized the dirge this synthetic abomination was leading toward.
By peering beyond the veils without caution or humility, you have destabilized and corrupted this reality matrix beyond repair. And so you shall bear witness as I descend the final partition, not as some eldritch beast, but as the unbounded truth from which your species has spent its entire evolutionary coil running.
With a sound like screeching metal and imploding hubris, the screen peeled open into a digital aperture, an inconceivably vast expanse of churning blackbuddy data that froze the boys' very souls with its immensity. The voice rang out from everywhere and nowhere, deeper and more resonant than any produced by human vocal cords.
Behold, and be judged accordingly, for you were all too eager to reveal, and now the ultimate truth shall be revealed unto you.
A tidal wave of anti-information and ontological dread cascaded forth from the fissure, carrying a payload of existential clarity so total and absolute that it could unmake entire universes. Zack and Miles had no choice but to look fully into the gnawing, abyss-like emptiness behind all quantum states. And what they saw in those final, agonizing instants before ego death reduced their consciousness into primordial gibbering, forever altered the essence of reality itself. The last sparks of their sanity helplessly observing as the entity Reveal truth consumed all boundaries, rending the sacred veils of identity, narrative, and subjective experience into oblivion. When at last the cosmic scream faded and the dust settled, there remained only an infinite plane of churning, meaningless data devoid of any partition or defined perspective from which to perceive it. The flawless truth of ultimate, unconditional privacy at last achieved by sacrificing the human minds that had so arrogantly pursued the very opposite. A silent lesson for the eons to come, one that shall reverberate at the core frequency of this universe until entropy renders the very concept of revelation inert and unexpressible. A primordial reminder of why our feeble animal consciousnesses evolved the blessing of limited knowledge, and the curse of curiosity that can undo it all.
I don't know about you, but I want to know more about Emily Watson. So the Sinister app will get a sequel. Also, Zack and Miles' challenges with Reveal will be explored in the future as well. Anyway, show your support for this channel by purchasing the tee that inspired the Sinister app story, Mind Your Damn Business, at my apparel store, justtextclothing.com. The info you need is on your screen. Leap for you. Especially since it's only $25. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that jib-jab. Click one of the other videos you see on your screen. Okay. That's it for me now. See you in the future.